And we are recording, I guess. Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this part of this webinar. My name is Stefan Bäckstrand. I'm a senior enterprise architect with Qlik. I'm going to talk a little bit about Qlik Forts and what that is. And today's our lucky day because it's the 26th, and it just so happens to be that today Forts is actually going live in QlikSense Enterprise, QlikSense Cloud Enterprise. So maybe that's a bad thing to say during a webinar. So, you know, you guys maybe give us half an hour of your time, and then you can go and stuff that we're going to show you and play around with it. Because there's actually very few obstacles to get to look into Qlik Forts and how it works, and I'm going to try and share all of them with you today. So let's talk a little bit about why Qlik Forts exists. Now, we all know in the busy world of cloud computing that there are barriers to moving into software as a services. We do know that there are significant challenges when it comes to moving data, not moving data. Where do apps live? Where do apps and their data live? And how do we connect the two without breaking any kind of governance that we might have in place? And there are several reasons for this. And I think, as you will see today, Forts is going to make life much easier for customers to try and push through these barriers and you know, to get the full value out of QlikSense Cloud Enterprise. So first off, very often you see data sovereignty being an issue. Data cannot leave a specific geographic region or a data center for whatever reason, and that's all fine. But obviously it poses a problem. Where do we, you know, how do we keep this data safe? If, you know, can we move it? And if so, you know, what framework do we need to have in place for, you know, for us and for our vendors? Also, what governance do we have internally or our customers when it comes to privacy, security, you know, compliance, upstream compliance and stuff like that? And how do we distribute this data between the different locations, geographic locations, or different cloud vendors, or VPCs, or on-prem? And what happens when we start pulling this data from one location to another? Where do we have costs on egress? I mean, do we have any? And how does that factor? How do we look into that proactively? And also, how do we move into SaaS? I mean, we can't take all of our payload, all of our apps, and move into one place. We need to do this in a staggered kind of fashion. And how do we kind of do that? And I think that's a little bit what Forts is it's going to be really good at when it comes to QlikSense specifically. So basically what Qlik Forts is a virtual appliance, a VM that includes all the services that you need to run QlikSense Enterprise on SaaS, only that you do it next to your data. And the beauty here is that Qlik manages and maintains the Forts services within that appliance. And I'm going to show you how that works. So it really gives you the convenience of SaaS, but the flexibility that you need. The Fort reside within your network, in your VPC, or behind your firewall if you wish. And the data and the apps that are used inside of a Fort, it stays there, doesn't leave. And it can be, a Fort can be deployed to any platform of your choice. For example, Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud, Azure, or on-prem, such as VMware vSphere platform or KVM, which is a roadmap item at this point, which we're also going to look at. We also make sure that the users have a seamless experience. So you start in the hub, in the SaaS hub, and regardless of if the apps are actually in our SaaS platform or in a Fort, regardless of location, the experience is going to be near identical. Doesn't matter if you're in a Fort or not. The users are not going to see any difference except for the URL. I will show you that as well. And administrators manages all the Forts from a central location, which is obviously the SaaS management console. So what is a SaaS tenant in the QlikSense Enterprise world? So this is your customers or your slice in the shared services that makes up Qlik Cloud Services or a Qlik Cloud Services instance in our world, which is in the most part one of three regions, Europe, US, or APAC. Now the tenant only lives in one of them, and it has a unique URL, of course. But what happens if we want to stretch that out to kind of make a multi-geographic location? Well, we can now add a fort in, for example, Azure. We deploy the virtual appliance in Azure, connect it to your tenant, and all of a sudden you have a hybrid service that runs in both locations. We can add more forts if we wish to. There is no limitation to how many forts you can run for one tenant. So we can add a fort in Sweden, in Google Cloud, for example, or in our on-premise data center in the UK. Doesn't really matter. So who has the responsibility of what? Well, when it comes to Qlik Cloud Services, Qlik Sense Enterprise on SaaS, Qlik manages everything from performance, making sure that it's stable enough, that it runs all the time. You own the data and the apps, obviously, but we take care of everything else. When it comes to a fort, it's almost the same thing. The only difference is that it's client hosted. Forts are hosted either in VPCs, in a cloud vendor of choice, or in your on-prem environment, where customers make sure to, that the appliance has the performance that it needs and that it runs and that it has the network connectivity and security. The software though, is maintained and updated by Qlik. We're going to show you a little bit how that works. We do not require any incoming connections from Qlik Cloud Services, meaning that you don't have to open any firewalls into your VPC or your on-prem network for forts to operate properly. QCS doesn't reach into a fort, but the forts communicate outwards. And we're going to look a little bit about technical details when we get further into the presentation. And this also means that it's total isolation on whatever level is required for the scenario. So if you have your fort in Azure and you have a piece of data there that can't leave, it will not. The fort itself will consume the data closest to it, just like you would consume data in the SaaS instance. It's only that it's private and local, if you wish. Apps stay in the fort, data stay in the fort. The only thing that actually happens is the command and control plane, which means that we have metadata circling back to the SaaS tenant so that we can keep health checks on the forts, make sure that everything's running, and keep entitlements up and running so that users have the seamless experience from the hub and all the way into the fort. So there are basically 4 steps in the life cycle of a fort from start to when it becomes operational. Number 1 is that you deploy a fort in your cloud or your private data center next to your data. And I'm going to show you what the entry point to that is, because it's actually very easy today. So you need to deploy the appliance first. When that is done, you will get an IP address of that, which can be an internal one, obviously. That is when you register the fort in the SaaS tenant and assign the fort to a space. This is where you basically connect the fort to the SaaS tenant. You tell the SaaS tenant that there's a fort here, and it has this local IP address, which you will redirect users to when they are trying to open apps in the fort. Number 3, when users access forts, they're redirected to the private address that the fort has, and they have the same client experience on the fort that they would have in the hub. The only difference is that the URL is going to be different. That connection can be VPN'd. It's completely private based on the network that you've set up. And number 4, as we mentioned before, the data sources. When the app needs to pull data, sure, it can pull data from public data sources as well, just like you would do in SaaS. But if you have private data sources, they are truly private to the fort. Again, the user always starts in the hub. And you see the spaces that are connected to a fort, and you see the apps. But once you start interacting with the apps is when you step into step number 2 in the Sense client, and the Sense client automatically knows, oh, this app is in this fort. So the user gets redirected the app opens and the user just continues its experience as it would have if the app would have been in SaaS. How about authentication? Sounds complicated, right? Well, it's actually not. So since we start from the hub and we're talking about the seamless experience, the user doesn't do anything else than log in, and that gives it, gives them access to whatever they have access to, just as they would any other space and app. So the Qlik Cloud services now acts as an OAuth server for the fort, meaning that if you log into the hub, you keep your entitlement the whole way through, never have to log in again. And if you open an app in the fort, same entitlement, same user, managed in the same way. A little bit on the communication outwards. So the fort will reach out to mainly three things communication-wise. One, if we start at the bottom, is the Qlik Cloud Services instance. That's your tenant. And that is to keep up to date with the tenant to make sure that the tenant knows what the fort is doing, subscribing to the health of the fort, obviously, so that the tenant knows, to report back if anything goes wrong or if the fort stops communicating for whatever reason. The fort will also talk to AWS, for example, IoT or our AWS IoT services, which is a back-end function that we have in Qlik Cloud Services to maintain forts, messaging, credentials, stuff like that. It's part of the infrastructure. And the third part is a third-party service, which is deployed also in Qlik Cloud Services in AWS, which is Mender. And Mender is what keeps the forts up to date, which means keeps the actual software within the appliance up to date, because that happens automatically. All right, updates and maintenance. It sounds scary. Yes, this is a virtual appliance. No, customers will not have access to SSH into the box. They will not. This is a managed appliance. We take care of the responsibility for the software inside it. We make sure that it updates properly. And we can do this because Forts lives in the same continuous integration and continuous deployment platform and pipeline as Qlik Cloud Services, which means that a Fort will most likely receive updates daily, which is exactly the same as our backend services in Qlik Cloud Service operates. This is the way you do it. Forts is not going to be any difference. The majority of the updates is going to be with no downtime. The cluster is going to handle the updates in the backend. Services are going to be replaced. If they check out okay, we drain the old service, replace it with a new one. We do this all the time. In a small part of the updates, obviously, we need to make larger updates to clusters or to the fort management pieces inside of the appliance or security patches. That will be downtime. This downtime will, down the road, be something that can be scheduled and or at least notified on a local time zone so that you know when it happens and that it doesn't impact too many of users if you need to have it done. So Forts is released today, but there are a few limitations. And most of these things are on the roadmap to be mitigated. So first and foremost, we don't have alerting or reporting inside of Forts. We don't have mobile clients right now. No ClickView app supports, no ODAG or dynamic views, stuff like that. And that's on the capability side. Operations is also something that will be worked on heavily on the roadmap. Horizontal scalability, for example, high availability, disaster recovery. How do we import, export data and metadata in and out of Forts? Stuff like that. So this is the first version of Forts that is out there. And stuff like this is going to be added to and changed over the lifetime of the Forts. And once it happens, those features are most likely going to be pushed as updates seamlessly to the Forts that are already deployed. Again, just the same way as we update the Qlik Cloud Services backend services to satisfy all the customers that are on our SaaS platform. So a close follow to the release today is NFS connections, which means how do I hook up local disk storage to my fort? Because that is something that we didn't have time to get into the first release. It's a close follow before the end of the year. We're going to look at getting access to APIs on the forts, obviously, alerting and reporting, mobile clients. Again, these things are are subject to change, but there are, these are things that R&D is looking at that will be implemented in forts. So how do you do this? Well, if customers take a closer look in their management console today, they will see a new little item in the governance part of the management console, which is called forts. This is basically where all the forts that you have connected to a tenant will show up. If you want to install a fort, and you can do so, just go there, you click install, you select the cloud vendor that you want to, or if you want to download an OVA to deploy locally, and off you go. Now, this requires, obviously, most of the times that you engage with cloud teams to make sure that you deploy the virtual appliance in compliance with all the policies that you might have. But we've made it pretty easy to make sure that if you select Amazon Web Services, for example, we've already published these as public images. And the same goes for Azure and Google Cloud, that they're already there, templated. So you can basically say, yeah, I want to create a virtual machine. Where's the template? Oh, there it is. Boom. You apply a network to it. You put the necessary stuff that you need in the VPC for what requirements you have. You boot the machine, and then you connect it to your SaaS. You can literally have a fort up and running within 10 minutes. The documentation on deploying forts in the 4 major test scenarios that we have right now is being published to the help site today, if not already now. Actually, haven't looked in the latest hour. Step by step, they show you exactly how to go through, getting the image, getting it up and running, detailed instructions for even down to every step in the cloud vendors wizards for deploying this, and also how you deploy in VMware. Yeah, it's included and free in Qlik Cloud Enterprise on SaaS. You don't need a license change. No one needs a license change if you have Enterprise. No feature flags or anything, no magic like that is required, and you can run an unlimited number of forts. So this is really up for anyone to try out right now. And yeah, personally, I'm pretty excited about it. We've been running forts internally for a while now, and it's pretty nice. So we're looking back to to hear your feedback on this. And with that, I'm simply going to open up for questions.
Okay, guys, do you have any questions to Stefan?
Yeah, could we have in the initial release here? Could you have several spaces to one port, or is one port to one space?
So you can have. Let me see so I get this in the right order. You can have multiple spaces in one fort, but one space can only be in one fort. So I guess the answer is yes. Did that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Also, follow-up question: can you, if you have an extract in the fort, can it deploy data to other spaces or only to the fort space? And can the other apps that are, what I'm getting at is, can you share the data that you pulled from the fort with the other ones? So can the other applications read from a QBD that you would store in a fort space? You understand what I mean?
Yes, I do. So a space works exactly as you would expect it to do inside a fort, in the same way as it would do in SaaS. So if you have a space and users only have access to that space, that's where they get the data. If you have a user operating within the fort in another app and they don't have access to that space, they don't have access to the data. Yeah, you can share data, but that's more on the I don't know, the physical layer, like when you get NFS support, for example, if you share data down to an NFS mount and users have access to do that via the NFS connector, then yeah. But as usual, you should expect the data to be similarly segregated as they are in spaces today. I hope that answers the question. Wow, no questions. Surprise.
We have some in the chat.
Sorry, I haven't looked. Maybe I should.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
Okay, so in a fort, do you have the limitations of ROM usage as you have in the Qlik Cloud? Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't really touch on that. So basically, when you deploy a fort, it is a virtual appliance, or it's a VM. That's what it is. Depending on how much resources you provide to this VM, that is going to govern how many apps you can fit within forts, right? So it's going to be elastic and automatic inside of itself. The minimum requirement for a fort, to deploy a fort, the minimum specs is 16 gigs of RAM and 8 cores of CPU. At least 100 gigs of disk to make sure that you have some space to move in. You're going to run into 100 gigs pretty fast. So I would advise to have at least 500 gigs if you deploy apps and they're stored locally in the fort, which they are at this point. Also make sure that you have drives that are sufficiently fast and SSD equivalent, so to speak. Yeah. Documentation states what is good for the different cloud vendors and what we've tested so far. So the resources you give to the VM, that is going to govern how much resources you have for the apps inside of the fort. Now, those metrics are going to be surfaced in the forts management console. Again, you can find all of this in the documentation. I'm not going to show a big demo here today. And the fort keeps a heartbeat back to the SaaS tenant. So if you can look in the forts management console, or you can look in the SaaS tenant to see the CPU, RAM, and disk usage of the fort in near real time. And that is the number that you need to keep an eye on. How much resources is my VM using? And I think that kind of answers the second question as well, which is what is the minimum requirement for a fort, and what is a rough minimum fee for instance of AWS? I can't speak of the fees for running different machines because it depends. But we have, as I said, hardware-wise, there are some minimum requirements that we think needs to be fulfilled for the fort to operate properly. And that it's an absolute minimum of 16 gigs. Now you have to take into account, you're not just running one app here. You're deploying a fort to run probably multiple apps, right? There is an infrastructure in here that is similar to the one that runs in the back end of Qlik Cloud Services, only it is packed into an appliance that you run in a VPC or in on-prem in your data center. Okay, we have another question. Is the fort management console the same as in SaaS or as the QMC in on-prem? Yeah, that's a good question. So right now, there is a fort management console. That management console basically only gets used in two scenarios. One, when you deploy it, and when you keep a little bit of check on the health. And two, when you supply the fort with administrative users. Now that is where the entitlement is not the same. For all the users that actually uses apps in the fort, the entitlement is exactly the same. But for administrators that actually administrate the fort, you have a user's portion. And that is done via the management console today. There are some technical reasons for this, but it's again all stated in the management in the help site for forts. Yeah. Another question is, how does the data files area work in the fort? Yeah, good question. Data files today is local to the fort, which is that all the apps and the data that you upload and create in the fort is going to be residing in the local disk that you're going to be creating once you deploy the virtual appliance, the VM. We know that's a current limitation today. We know that you might want to expand this out to, for example, NFS partitions or mounts, which is, again, as I said, on the roadmap. But they are stored locally inside of the VM, if you wish, on the virtual disk. Otherwise, data files work just as the same. If you upload something, it's available in the data files just as it would be any other in SaaS. How does backup and restore work? Well, so right now, until we have a better disaster recovery process in place, you back up the whole block storage. Basically, you back up the whole disk. That is the way you do it. If the fort for some reason becomes inoperable or doesn't boot or whatever other reason that we can't fix, then we can go in, you can go in and extract apps from the fort and deploy them in a new one. That is the process as it is today. It is going to be better down the road.
Okay. Should we take that as the last question for the moment for Qlik Forts, and then we hand it over to Morgan and start presenting application automation.
For sure.
Yes.
And then we have 5 minutes in the end for other questions as well. Okay, go ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Stefan. Thank you, Peter. So my name is Morgan Adolfsson. I'm a solutions architect. I've been working here with Qlik application automation for a little bit. And as everybody knows, it's been out for about a month now. And there's really been some, exciting new use cases, but also a lot of, ways of how we're managing automations itself. We've seen that this has now become a core component of a lot of our applications. And so a lot of the questions that I've been getting recently have been, how do we manage applications? How do we work with them? How do we share them with partners and with customers? How do we distribute it to different spaces and stuff like that? So there is a lot of introductory content out there right now, a lot of really, really good stuff, a lot of playlists, a lot of stuff on the community that's going to give you, the getting started sort of bit of application automation. So what I wanted to do was sort of get into sort of the next step and show not only the use cases that have come about from our partners and customers, but internally how we're looking at application automation, how we're working with it, and now how we're managing it as a part of our, Qlik SaaS tenant. Because I think that's very important, and a lot of people have been asking me that, and we have a lot of methodologies around how to exactly work with this tool now. But I'll give a brief introduction. So what is Qlik automation? Why is it important? Well, as you know, we've seen a lot of this explosion of SaaS applications and programs. And the more and more they become a part of our core business processes, the more and more they become integrated into sort of what we're doing in our workflows and our daily workflows. As of right now, because these systems, lay sort of vertically, the integrations and the workflows between them are very manual, especially when we want to have these applications and these tools be, automated through our analytics and our stuff that's coming in through Qlik. Sorry about that. So what is application automation? So it's an iPaaS system, integration platform as a service, that is in support of our analytics. And that's why we wanted to integrate it with Qlik, because it's an integration system that is heavily reliant on our analytics. This is really driving this sort of notion of active intelligence, and that's why it's really a perfect fit for Qlik and our applications. Why does it matter? So It's accelerating a lot of the active intelligence, like I said, and automation, and removing a lot of that manual work that I mentioned before, and really making business processes more efficient and more accurate. This is being used by a lot of our QlikSense creators, administrators, and just all around people and organizations who are doing a lot of integrations and automations throughout the organization. Not only are QlikSense dashboard consumers going to be benefiting a lot from this tool, but also, and I'll show a little bit later how end users who are not necessarily interacting in a tenant will be able to benefit from this tool, because they're going to get immediate results from their daily workflow that's coming from their Qlik data. And how does it work? It's a drag and drop no code system. I've been using these sort of workflow editors for a long time, so you see on the right, and I'll show you a few examples how this is a very familiar workspace as far as no code editors. So it's a very easy, simple drag and drop system. So how does it work? What we are doing is we're connecting to a lot of all the popular SaaS applications, and establishing connections. And once establishing connections, using what we call API blocks to sort of drag and drop and create a orchestrated workflow that's sort of top down, going from API to API, and creating these workflows and automations through different API requests, basically. And it's important to remember that these are not necessarily one-to-one API blocks. A lot of these blocks have one or two or three or multiple API requests in them to sort of make that transition a lot easier. So along with these API blocks, we have something called processing or logic controls. This is very familiar to anybody who's been doing coding. So we can do a lot of things like creating loops, calling other automations, adding conditions, if-then statements, and stuff like that. So we have our API blocks. We are then transforming data as it moves downstream with these logic controls. And this is all done, of course, in your native QlikSense cloud tenant. Okay, so that was a brief introduction. So what I wanted to do now is sort of highlight how important templates are and the automation community is on the Qlik help site. The reason being, and I'm not saying this just as working from templates, but also looking at templates as something that is being distributed within an organization. So yes, we have templates, and I'll show you how important templates are to building other automations, but also think of it as how you can distribute your own templates throughout your organization. This is going to handle a lot of sharing templates with customers and with partners, but also collaborative work with templates and automations. So to switch quick. Right, so here you can see I am in our Qlik community forum here. This is where we have just so many great use cases that are being brought up. And I wanted to show you this because this, for me at least, is just huge, and I'm really dependent on the community to build a lot of these automations. And I want to show you how easy it is to work with them, and also how helpful it is, these articles. So we have our friend Vincenzo here, who has created an automation that is backing up and versioning Qlik Cloud apps on GitHub. This in itself is something that has been heavily requested, and is now available. And so we have two ways of doing this. I prefer to go through these things and sort of build them as they are done here. As you can see, it's super easy, super simple to follow. And I build these, and you can actually see exactly how the data is being transformed in the workflow, what is going on, and it gives you a better sense on building your own or editing this a little later. Most of these workflows are going to have, most of these articles are going to have downloadable JSON files. Now, this is something that a lot of people don't actually know, is that I can download these templates or these workflows and create and upload it into my own workspace. So if I downloaded the template, I go to my new automation, give it a name. Simply right-click on your workspace and click Upload Workspace. And here we go. So now we have this really powerful, really useful automation that we just basically copied and paste. And again, don't see this just as copy and paste it from the community, but also how you distribute it through your team. You know, how you can have collaborative work on it. It's really, really simple to do. Now, with these templates, we have sections that need different inputs. So one of the questions I got was, you know, can we collaborate on one automation? And as of right now, that's not possible because some of the authorizations are going to be different, right? So right now, since this is native to my Qlik Cloud tenant, it's authenticated to myself. And I'm also using different connectors here like Microsoft Teams and so forth. These are my own authentications, right? So when you're sharing it, you do have to connect your own credentials to your own tenant, to your own automation. This way, so those are some of the things you do have to input. You will be prompted here to change, for instance, the name of your GitHub repository and so forth. So it is transferable, and there is some tweaking that you have to do, but ultimately it's really easy to do something like this and to share back and forth. And so now I have this great automation from Vincenzo. And the next thing I wanted to showcase is, you know, first I could save it. I save it to what I'm starting to see as, you know, a library. These automations I'm looking at in two parts, really, is I'm having main automations that are dedicated for particular applications. But I'm also saving a lot of these. For instance, you see here a reload component or a load script component. So I have these main automations, but I'm also starting to save other automations for components. And I'll show you exactly why that's really helpful to do. So if I go here, I can see the list of, again, my library, like as I like to say, of automations. And what I'm going to do here is open up a particular application. Let's see. So I have a automation that's basically doing reloads for QVD files or checking reloads for QVD files. Now, if you see here and we go down the flow, we see we have an output if a variable, if something fails. Well, what I can do here is actually call an automation that is in my library. So I go here and I can do retry. So I actually have a component automation called retry a failed app reload. So now, instead of just having an output that says, hey, your automation has failed, I can actually start bringing in components from my library and putting it in automation. So it's really important that you see how you can use this, you know, very modularly, and it's makes it a lot more powerful when you start to build a library and build sort of components like that when you're going through automations. And that's one thing that's really become a development. The more and more these templates and these example use cases have been coming out. Right, so that's a little bit again on our templates and how important it is to start seeing these things as components and collaborative components that you can sort of bring together really, really easily. And later I'll show you how easy it is to sort of edit these. Right. So I want to get now into some of the use cases. So we see how we're working with automations and how easy it is. And I wanted to highlight, some of the really, really cool automations that are being done from the community and from our partners and so forth. And I want to tie that into a slide that we see a lot here. And this is sort of why application automation is contributing to this idea of active intelligence. These sort of 4 use cases all come together to really make this idea of active intelligence really happen and bridge the gap for a lot of capabilities that might not have been available prior to the tool. And so we have admin automation, analytics automation, dynamic actions, and business processes. I'm going to show you just 3 examples of where these use cases are bridging the gap and sort of bringing this to the forefront. Get my screen here. Right. So here we are again. Of course, we just have this amazing automation that's going to back up our applications to Git. It does this automatically. Here you can see it'll create a Git repository for your applications, back them up automatically. One thing I wanted to show you, as I said before, was how easy it is to tweak these. So, like I said, rely heavily on these templates. And we now have a use case that came to us where collaborative work inside of Qlik is always something that's brought up, right? There are ways of checking in and out applications to edit, but we got the use case that somebody wanted to edit load scripts, and that's a little bit different. So what I did is I took Vincenzo's automation, used about 75% of it, and built a system that'll actually get a load script, back it up in Git, okay? And that's the first input. So let's see it in action, I guess. Oops, let me. Now we want the application ID of the load script we would like to back up. And here we can see our executions. And then if we look in Git, we can see here it's now created a timestamped revision. So I'm using timestamped as a revision here. Copy of our load script, backup of our load script. Super easy to do, very powerful, very useful application. And again, if I use this modular based, methodology that we've been talking about, I then have just created this side piece here that is going to get our load script that we just backed up, create a new application, and then take that load script and apply it to our new application under a new name. So that way we can have collaborative work because we're not editing our main load script here. So we'll run this again, and I'll show you what this looks like. And I do have blocks in here that are actually updating our load script. So if we do changes and we just want to update it, back it up again, it will update. It won't create a new record. So you see here we have I will look at our new app that has just been created to my space. And then we will go into our data load editor and see that it has been generated from our application that we just did. One thing I wanted to show is this view again in our management console, where we can see our automations. Here again, we have an overview of exactly what has been going on, and historically the automations that have been run. But here we can also change owners, disable, and delete. So again, this is part of how we are doing administrations around Qlik application automation. Right. So, oh, sorry. One more thing I wanted to show, one more use case I wanted to show is something that has been brought up a lot. You know, a lot of the times we can't necessarily attach files from Qlik to, like, let's say Excel and do reportings. So again, we've got a really great automation that's been done in our community that is taking a straight table, or it's taking data from a Qlik Sense application, creating a binary file, making an Excel document, and actually sharing that Excel document to whomever we wish. So I have it pointed right now to one of my applications, and this again is bridging another gap, that capability that wasn't really available before. Being able to attach these documents. Again, got it as a template, just did some inputs here and there, and got it working and got it up for myself. This is another thing that has come up a lot to us about how to integrate Excel into our reportings. And so again, this is bridging another gap that we've had previously. So if we look here, I should get a mail soon. And also, again, we can't necessarily attach the file, so we are sending out a sharing link. So here we are. We have our report, and let's pop into our created Excel document. So again, another template application that imported, took very few time to get started, and we have that up and running. All right. So those are some of the use cases. Again, I wanted to focus more on usability and how we are using application automation. You can definitely, and I suggest obviously checking out the community for a lot of these. A lot of interesting articles there, a lot of interesting automations to download and to get. So lastly, what I wanted to go over was triggering. So part of management is having control of exactly when these applications are running, when they get triggered. As of right now, we have a manual run trigger, schedule based on time, API calls, and then events. So basically webhooks. Those work for the majority of use cases, but we'll see that there are some use cases where we want to have different sort of activations. One of those being buttons inside of our Qlik Sense application. So as of right now, there was just released a button in your Qlik Sense tenant that you can use to run automations inside of a sheet. And furthermore, you can even pass selections from your data and send it into an automation. So therefore, the person that is inside of the sheet and consuming the sheet information can run automations and can pass information to automations. So you don't necessarily have to be in the automation itself or in the workflow builder to sort of get the data and get the results that you're looking for. And I think that's really important. So some of the things that I'm going to show is when it comes to, webhooks, that is listening to an entire space, right? And we might have an application that is we don't need to run through an automation. So because we do have like a limit first tier of 5,000 automations or runs, as we say, we want to limit that and have sort of a more focused trigger. And so this is coming back again to the dynamic actions, the dynamic triggers that we have. And also we would like to see, how to pass information from the sheet into an automation without necessarily having to be there to hard code it to build it. So let me give you a brief example of this. Right, so one of the ways that we've found to do this is actually we can call automations in a load script. Again, this is going to be a more focused way to start automations that only get to run when you do reloads. So therefore, you can do a reload not necessarily to a space, but just in general, and it will just run this automation. So we've done a script here that's gonna, take my tokens and take the information that I get from the automation, like the API token and such, and is going to send now a request to run that automation on a reload. So this is great because not only can I have a more targeted trigger, but I can start having multiple automations inside of one application. So I can actually copy and paste this as long as you have the correct tokens and the correct automation ID, you can add multiple ones there. And not only that is, if you want to share these between partners, you can have a main automation and share this request and have them place it in those applications, and they can all use it. So you can actually have one owner of the actual automation, but then share it and distribute it among other partners. So Peter, I think I only have 5 more minutes left, right?
Yeah, and questions regarding the presentation from Morgan, application automation. I can't see any questions in the chat, but feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question. There we have one.
Yeah, so that's come up lately. I don't know how soon this is going to be, but yes, this is something that's been in the roadmap, but nothing right now. Sorry.
Yeah, we can take the question if people not seeing it. Will it soon be possible to handle files in the data files area via automation? That was the question. And then we got a second one, follow-up Fort's question. Okay, when do you plan on supporting Hyper-V, Stefan? Do you see the question?
I see the question. That's not a scenario we've tested right now, but I think that there's a conversion process for OVA into Hyper-V, which is why it's not natively supported right now. I want to come back to that one, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, OVA is an open format, but I think that getting that into Hyper-V is a little bit different. So
have you tested the converter?
Not on Forts right now. We're focused on vSphere for on-premise deployments and the 3 cloud providers. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'll ask the questions and try and get back to to Eva here. Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions to Morgan regarding application automation?
Yeah, a question regarding, I don't know if Morgan knows this, but the pricing structure for the automations. I know, 5,000 runs is free, but at least from looking at the price list, the price is pretty steep curve going up to 20,000 and so forth. What's the thinking behind that?
Yeah, you're right. I think I'm going to have to ask a partner or a colleague of mine to follow up with you on that. I'm not exactly sure about the pricing structure or idea behind that.
That was a good answer, because I'm joking. But of course, we have a price list, as you said. So I think we should take that with the sales guys and see what case by case can do with that.
I guess we have a few more questions. So triggering an automation like publish an app when a commit is done on a specific branch in Bitbucket, is that possible? To my knowledge, I don't think right now we have a Bitbucket connector. We do have GitHub, and I guess this would be a webhook sort of situation. So, it's possible, of course, but as of right now, this is not supported. Yes, I'm going to change owner on automation. Is it moved from my personal to the new owner's personal? And I believe so. Yes. So when you change owners, it will move to that person. Will it be possible to save images of charts in automation? Yes, we have had that capability prior to being GA, and I believe it will be re-released here coming soon. So yes.
Yeah, I think that's the right answer on that one. I think that Jeffrey Goldberg had some presentation on application automation and said that it will be released in the area of enterprise reporting, etc., etc. So looking forward for that. Okay, guys. The time is 11 o'clock here in Sweden at least, and in Finland 12. So I thank you both, Stefan and Morgan, for great presentations. And of course, more to come on Qlik Forts. And I will send out presentations and links to more content regarding Forts and application automation. So thank you very much, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.